Friends, today's CME is on shock. What are the recent advancements in pediatric shock? So we'll learn together in next 45 to 50 minutes about shock, what is the definition of shock, what are the different etiologies of shock, how clinically we recognize the state of shock, what investigations are required in a case of shock, and how to manage a child presenting in emergency in a state of shock. So, shock is a state of decreased perfusion of tissues due to one or more of the following: decreased delivery of oxygen to the tissues, inabilities of the tissues to utilize oxygen, and excessive consumption of oxygen by tissues leading to failure to meet the metabolic demands of tissues. So, for the diagnosis, it should be quickly diagnosed and managed so as to avoid irreversible damage to vital organs. Shock is manifested by hemodynamic instability, which in turn, that is hemodynamic instability is manifested by abnormal hemodynamic parameters and features of less perfusion of end organs. So what are the types of shocks? It may be hypovolemic, it may be cardiogenic, it may be distributive, it may be obstructive. So these are the main four types of shocks, and sepsis may cause any type of shock. It may cause hypovolemic shock, like if there is sepsis and there is third space lossing, intravascular volume will be low and there will be hypovolemic shock. There are so many cytokines produced in sepsis which depresses the myocardium, so it may cause cardiogenic shock. There is vasodilatations and it may lead to distributive shock, and there may be extensive thrombosis and embolism in the pulmonary systems which may cause obstructive shock. So sepsis can cause any type of shocks, right from hypovolemic, cardiogenic, distributive to obstructive shock. What are the causes of hypovolemic shock? So it is caused by fluid and electrolyte loss in the settings of acute gastroenteritis, excessive sweating, or renal loss due to various causes. Hypovolemic shock may be due to plasma loss, due to burn or third space loss, as I have already said, may be due to septic conditions. It may also cause hypovolemic shock. So, hemorrhage may be responsible for hypovolemic shock. Maybe external hemorrhage, maybe internal hemorrhage. External hemorrhage is obvious, like in trauma, bleeding disorders, GI bleed. Internal hemorrhage is hidden, and which may be vascular, visceral, or there may be internal fractures of bones leading to hemorrhage and hypovolemia and leading to hypovolemic shock. In cases of adrenal insufficiency, there may be hypovolemic shock. There may be some endocrinal causes of hypovolemic shock, like in diabetes mellitus, diabetes insipidus. There is no obvious loss of fluid, but there is hypovolemia and hypovolemic shock in these settings. So it should be kept in mind. Cardiogenic shock may be caused by myocarditis, cardiomyopathy, some congenital heart diseases, dysrhythmia, metabolic conditions like hypoxia, hypoglycemia, hypothermia, uremia, and acidosis. Some drugs may be responsible for cardiogenic shock like anthracyclines, tricyclic antidepressant, beta blockers, and cardiogenic shock is commonly seen in cardiac surgery, post-cardiac surgery patient. Distributive shock. It may be caused by anaphylaxis, neurogenic causes like injury to the sympathetic chain in the cervical rib fractures, and some drugs may be responsible for the distributive shock. And as I have described, sepsis may also be responsible for this kind of shock, that is distributive shock. Now come to obstructive shock. It may be caused by pericardiac tamponade, pneumopericardium, tension pneumothorax, pulmonary embolism, congenital heart diseases like aortic stenosis, contraction of aorta, interrupted aortic arch, critical pulmonary stenosis. These all are the causes of obstructive shock. So as I have already described, sepsis may be responsible for all types of shocks. The four main types of shock, that is hypovolemic, cardiogenic, obstructive, as well as distributive. So this is very important to understand pathophysiology of shock. Once we understand the pathophysiology of shock, then it will be easy to recognize shock and treat shock. So this is very important. So shock is a state of circulatory failure to deliver substrate and remove toxins at cellular level. Normally what happens in oxidative metabolism, 36 ATP is formed per molecule of glucose when there is adequate supply of glucose and oxygen. So if there is adequate supply of glucose and oxygen to the mitochondria, there will be 36 ATP formations. But what happens in stressful conditions? First, glycogenosis and glyconeogenesis starts as a compensatory mechanism to compensate it. When these compensatory mechanisms, that is glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, fail, glycolysis and secondary fat metabolism become the primary source of energy. So then less efficient pathway starts, it takes over. What is the less efficient pathway? It is anaerobic pathway. More efficient was aerobic pathway, but less efficient is anaerobic pathway. It starts in a stage of shock, and in that condition only 2 ATP per molecule of glucose is formed. This is anaerobic conditions. And pyruvate normally should be converted into a style coenzyme A, but here what happens, due to less absence of oxygen in anaerobic conditions, pyruvate is converted into lactate, and there will be accumulation of lactate inside the cells. Now what is the end result of this? So there will be failure of membrane ion pump, there will be cellular acidosis, lactate has been accumulated inside the cells, it is acid, so there will be cellular acidosis, then there will be cellular edema, then there will be leakage of cellular contents out of the cells, and cellular death. So leakage of cellular contents out of the cells, lactic acid has been accumulated inside the cells, it will be leaked, coming to the intravascular component, and it will be detected by serum lactic acid level or on the ABG report. So there will be lactic acidosis. So this is very important to understand. See, airway, breathing and fractional concentration of inspiratory oxygens. So this is responsible for saturation of oxygen in the blood, and hemoglobin level is important, adequate hemoglobin to carry the oxygen in the blood. So blood saturation depends on hemoglobin level and oxygen saturation of the hemoglobin. In turn, this oxygen saturation depends on airway. If airway is normal, clear, breathing is proper, and fractional concentration of inspiratory oxygen is adequate, then there will be adequate saturation of the blood, and oxygen will be adequately delivered to the tissues. Now see here, stroke volume, this is very important. Stroke volume is the unit of blood ejected per contraction of the heart. So stroke volume depends on what? This is very important to know. Stroke volume depends on preload, I will describe in detail, afterload and contractility of the heart. So stroke volume into the rate is cardiac output. So cardiac output, if the cardiac output is adequate, if the blood oxygen saturation is adequate, adequate oxygen will be delivered to the tissues. Any hindrance anywhere will lead to the state of shock. So key parameters of metabolic homeostasis are tissue blood flow, balance between oxygen delivery and demand, and oxygen content of the blood, arterial blood. Oxygen consumption is equal to total arterial oxygen into oxygen extraction ratio, total arterial oxygen flow. And in normal condition, oxygen demand is independent of oxygen delivery, as the arterial oxygen flow is higher than the oxygen consumption. So flow is higher, consumption is less. It is normal conditions. But when demand increases due to certain stressful conditions, what happens? At first, heart rate increases, stroke volume increases to meet the demand. So there is tachycardia. There is more forceful contraction of the heart, and there will be increase in the heart rate to meet the metabolic demand. This is the mechanism of the body. In shock state, oxygen extraction ratio increases as DO2 decreases. What is DO2? DO2 is this total arterial oxygen flow. So what happens in shock? Oxygen is low. Oxygen flow is low. So if oxygen extraction ratio increases as oxygen flow decreases, so in cases of shock state, if oxygen flow is low, extraction increases. Means flow is low, tissue extracts more oxygen to maintain its status. But what happens after that? At a critical point, increase in oxygen extraction cannot compensate low oxygen arterial flow. And then what happens? This VO2 becomes dependent on the, that is consumption of oxygen becomes dependent on the oxygen supply. Less supply, less consumption. At this critical point, it depends on, consumption depends on supply. So if it is less supply, less consumption. Then what happens? Beyond this threshold point, lactate begins to rise due to oxygen depth. So it depends on oxygen supply. Oxygen is less being supplied, so there is accumulation of lactic acidosis due to anaerobic metabolism. Now, the anaerobic metabolism takes over the aerobic metabolism. So, total arterial flow of oxygen, that is DO2, depends on how much amount of blood is pumped out of the heart, that is stroke volume. And the stroke volume per minute is cardiac output. So the arterial flow of oxygen is dependent on this cardiac output. And content of arterial oxygen, it is written as CaO2, content of arterial oxygen. And content of arterial oxygen depends on amount of hemoglobin. That's why in certain conditions we give hemoglobin, we give PRBC to increase the hemoglobin level of the patient, to increase the arterial content of oxygen, to increase the oxygen capacity of the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. So it depends on the content of arterial oxygen, depends on amount of hemoglobin and arterial oxygen saturation. It is written as SaO2. So DaO2 is equal to arterial quantum of oxygen multiplied by cardiac output, and some amount of blood, most of the oxygens are bound to the hemoglobin, but some amount of oxygen is dissolved directly in the blood due to pressure effect. So this is the formula: arterial content of oxygen is equal to hemoglobin level, arterial saturation of hemoglobin. This is the cofactor plus this pressure of oxygen plus 0.003. This is the amount of blood directly dissolved in the amount of oxygen directly dissolved in the blood. So this is very important to know, the pathophysiology. Now see, end diastolic filling volume of the ventricle is known as preload. What is this end diastolic filling volume? The venous return is coming into the heart, and when the heart is dilated, all the blood are coming into the heart, and this volume at the end of diastole is known as preload. So preload myocardial contractility and afterload. This is important for the adequate stroke volume. So preload depends on the end diastolic filling volume. Then comes the role of myocardial contractility. Then comes the role of afterload, that is systemic vascular resistance. It is responsible for afterload. So afterload in children increases due to various causes, like the child is in pain, anxiety, fever. There will be increase in afterload. So as we will decrease the fever by medicines, allay the anxiety of child, decrease the pain, afterload decreases. So these are the methods to decrease the afterload. Now clinical presentation is non-specific. Why it is non-specific? It may be present in various conditions in children, not only in shock. That is why it is called non-specific. So there may be lethargy may be seen in other conditions also. There may be lethargy, weakness, sense of malaise, poor feeding, decreased urine output, and fussiness. These are the clinical symptoms. So in history, there may be clue to the type of shock, like gastroenteritis, like hemorrhage, some cardiac conditions, pre-existing cardiac conditions. So these are in history, and it will lead to the cause of shock. So this is the clinical burden. Child below 3 months always suspect severe bacterial infection unless proved otherwise. So in children less than 3 months, there is no chance of SBI, severe bacterial infection. In neonates in the first week of life with hepatomegaly and murmur, there may be obstructive cardiac lesion, that is congenital lesion, obstructive cardiac lesion, like contraction of aorta, interrupted aortic arch. On physical examination, what we will get? Tachycardia. Tachycardia may be absent in hypothermic patient. And there is another condition in neurogenic shock. Neurogenic causes are responsible for distributive shock. What happens in neurogenic cause? Sympathetic drive is lost. So the tone is lost. There will be hypotension, and if sympathetic drive is lost, who will increase the heart rate? So there may be bradycardia. So in that conditions, there will be no tachycardia, there will be bradycardia in spite of hypotension. If there is hypotension, heart increases its rate to compensate it, but there is loss of sympathetic mechanism, there is injury to the cervical spine. So in that condition, hypotension, bradycardia. Signs of impaired organ perfusion are altered mental status, decreased urine output. So altered mental status will be seen when there will be hypotension. If there is no hypotension, but patient will be alert. Signs of delayed peripheral perfusion: cool extremities, capillary refill time more than 2 seconds, and low volume pulse. So how we should see capillary refill time? It should be seen in the periphery, like these fingertips and tip of the toe. Just press it for 5 seconds, count 5 seconds, and release it. If it feels in less than 2 seconds, capillary refill is normal. Temperature instability. There may be hypothermia as well as hyperthermia, and there is tachypnea. So these all will get on physical examination. Okay. So, what is the concept of cold shock and warm shock? Now this concept has been abolished. I will describe you. After the severe sepsis campaign 2020, there are various changes. But for our understanding and management, we should know this. Cold shock, cold extremities, increased skin temperature gradient. Skin temperature gradient means center is warm, periphery is cold. So increased temperature gradient and low volume pulses, capillary refill is more than 2 seconds. So if this is the condition, it is called cold shock. If extremities are warm, pulses are pounding, capillary refill time is less 1 to 2 seconds. So here capillary refill time is less, means there is no delayed capillary refill time. Pulses are pounding, extremities are warm, still the child is in shock. This is called warm shock. So what is the concept of compensated and decompensated shock? See, in compensated shock, blood pressure is maintained as compared to adult. In children, blood pressure is maintained till late stage of shock. So if the child is in shock and blood pressure is low, then the child has remained in compensated shock for hours together. So in compensated shock, blood pressure is maintained, but brain and heart perfusion is adequate because bloods are shunted past the skin, the kidneys, and it is directed towards the brain and heart. So brain and heart perfusion is maintained at this stage of shock. There will be increased heart rate, increased systemic vascular resistance, and periphery will be cold. So this is the state of compensated shock. Now decompensated shock. So in decompensated shock, hypotension occurs and additional organ damage will be there if not corrected quickly. So if you are seeing a patient in shock and hypotension, it is decompensated shock. It is alarming condition. Act quickly, otherwise the child is going to irreversible shock and survival is very difficult. So this is the stage where you have no time. Quickly you have to correct it. So it occurs late in pediatric shock. It is a ominous clinical sign and intervene immediately. Otherwise, the child is going to irreversible shock and there will be cardiovascular collapse and cardiac arrest. Survival is very difficult. So time is very important in the management of shocks. Early detection, early treatment. Now, cardiogenic shock. So it is clinically manifested by tachycardia, hepatomegaly, cardiac murmur. So these are the three cardinal signs. There may be precordial heat, there may be gallop rhythm, and jugular venous distension. So in children it is slightly difficult to see the JVP as compared to adult, but with practice you can see it, JVP, whether it is erased or not. Now come to investigations. So investigations should follow initial stabilization. So this is the condition in which treatment comes first, then investigation, because life of child is endangered. So the main investigations are blood glucose level, complete blood count, blood gas analysis, ABG, BBG, serum lactate. Then comes the role of prothrombin time, partial prothrombin time, serum fibrinogen level, T dimer, then comprehensive metabolic panel like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, all that, and then culture of the body fluids like blood culture, urine culture, CSF culture. So these are the investigations. But first, stabilize the patient, then investigate. Further investigations, we can do chest radiograph. In chest radiographs, you can detect causes of obstructive shock like pneumothorax, tension pneumothorax. There is difference between pneumothorax and tension pneumothorax. So tension pneumothorax is a condition which in the condition of tension pneumothorax, child presents in a state of shock. But in pneumothorax, child may be stable. So there is a condition tension pneumothorax and pneumothorax. Tension pneumothorax is an emergency condition. Pneumothorax can wait for the treatment. Okay. Then mixed venous oxygen saturation. So how do you take this mixed venous oxygen saturation? So mixed venous oxygen saturation, when we do BBG, The accurate method of taking this mixed venous oxygen saturation is pulmonary artery catheterization and take the sample from the distal port of this catheter, which is not being done in pediatric practice. Nowadays, rarely it is being done. So, if you have put the central line and you have taken the sample from central line, it is surrogative of mixed venous oxygen saturation. So, mixed venous oxygen saturation is denoted as SpO2, and if you have taken from central line, it is ScPO2. Then central venous pressure measurement. So if you have put the catheter in the central vein, like in superior vena cava, and if you have attached to the transducer, it will reflect central venous pressure. The normal value is 8 to 12 centimeter. Then cardiac output monitoring. Cardiac output, if you have echocardiography facility in your PICU, you can do cardiac output monitoring. Then B-type natriuretic peptide, BNP. We are doing in PICU BNP in various patients. Then serum biomarker profile. I will show you the serum biomarker profile. What are these? And this is new, near infrared spectroscopy. So what is this? NIRS, near infrared spectroscopy, in which there is optic probe, and you just put the probe here on the forehead, and it will tell you the saturation of the blood at this level. If you will put the probe at the level of kidney, it will show you the saturation at the kidney level. So maximum supply of the blood in any organ is the venous supply. So if NIRS will put on this forehead, then it will give you the venous saturations, and this is surrogate of this mixed venous oxygen saturation. So this is non-invasive method to detect mixed venous oxygen saturation. And what is the importance of getting this mixed venous oxygen saturation, I will describe why it is important. So these are the serum biomarkers. See, liposaccharide binding protein 3, angiopoietin 1, angiopoietin 2, CC chemokine ligand CCL3, heat shock protein 17K, interleukin 8, elastase 2, lipocalin 2. So these are the latest serum biomarkers in a stage of shock. And what is the importance of this? This model, if you are able to do these things, this level in the serum, what is the benefit? This model prognosticate mortality with sensitivity of 83% and specificity of 75%. So this is very high specificity and sensitivity if you are able to measure this in the serum. So now, what is the importance of this mixed venous oxygen saturation? What I have told you, the standard is from distal port of Swan-Ganz catheter in the pulmonary artery. This is called SvO2. So, blood returning to the heart from mixed central venous, blood returning to the heart is mixed central venous blood. So, central venous catheter is a surrogate marker of SpO2, but it is denoted as ScPO2. See, this is very important to understand. Arterial oxygen saturation normally is 93 to 100%. SaO2, it is coming in the ABG report. When you will do ABG, it will come. And when you will do the PBG, and if you will take the venous sample from the central venous catheter, then it will be surrogate of SpO2, and it is written as ScPO2. See, normal mixed venous oxygen saturation is between 65 to 77%. Now, tissue extract 23 to 35% oxygen delivered to it. Tissue extract. Blood oxygen is going in the artery, tissue extract it, then the blood is coming to the veins. So how much the tissue extracts? 23 to 35% oxygen supply. Tissue extracts it. So why you should know this? If oxygen extraction difference is more than 35%, so the normal is between 23 to 35%. If this difference is more than 35%, perfusion to capillary bed is inadequate. Means less oxygen has been extracted by the tissue, because tissue is unable to extract the oxygen due to a state of shock. So less oxygen has been extracted by the tissue. This is the stage of shock. Now, if the oxygen extraction difference is less than 23%, so this is 23%, there has been shunting of blood past tissue capillary bed due to arteriovenous shunting, and this is the stage of vasodilatation, like in septic shock, distributive shock. So blood has not been taken by the tissues because blood has shunted past the tissues because there is abnormal vasodilatations due to septic conditions, septic shock, distributive shock. So there have been abnormal vasodilatation, there has been formation of anastomosis, blood has shunted past the tissue has not extracted the oxygen. So this difference is less than 23%. So this is the importance of knowing this mixed venous oxygen saturation and the difference. Now CVP and cardiac index. What is this? CVP is pressure transduced in the catheter placed in superior vena cava. What I have told you. So normal CVP is 8 to 12 centimeter of water. Clinically, by measuring JVP, you can say that CVP is like this, which I have told you so many times in the world. How to measure JVP and how to add 5 millimeter of arterial pressure and calculate, and it will be the surrogate of CVP if you are not putting the central venous catheter in the superior vena cava. What is cardiac index? Cardiac output per meter square of body surface area is cardiac index, and normal value is between 3.5 to 5.5 meter square. Cardiac output is measured by pulmonary artery catheterization. This is the classical method of measuring the cardiac output, which we are not doing. But classical method is this. Other methods are Doppler echocardiography. This is easy, we can do Doppler echocardiography to measure the cardiac output, and others are femoral artery thermodilation catheter, Pico pulse control cardiac output catheter, which we are not doing. But this is easy. Echocardiography, Doppler echocardiography, and you can measure the cardiac output. Now this is very important. This is early goal directed therapy of the shock, which we all are doing in a patient of shock. So this flow chart is very important to know, in which push 20 cc of acetylenic saline or colloid bolus and push 3 times in 5 minutes at 5 minutes interval process, and in the 15 minutes see whether it is fluid responsive shock or refractory shock. Then establish intravenous catheter, begin vasopressor if it is fluid refractory shock. If fluid and dopamine resistant shock, then give epinephrine for cold and norepinephrine for warm shock. So this is the old concept. This concept has changed now. Okay, so this we are doing all these things and all have changed, and I will describe what recently we are doing. So see, the idea is to achieve normal mental status, normal blood pressure, normal or threshold heart rate. The idea of the treatment is to achieve this, and normal and equal central and peripheral pulses with capillary fill time of less than 2 seconds. You will not put 1 ml per kg per hour. Blood urea creatinine within normal limit, normal glucose level, normal iodide calcium level, and decreasing serum lactate level. These are our idea for the treatment. We have to achieve this. So initial resuscitation, airway should be maintained. Airway should be maintained, and initially give 100% oxygen via the face mask. And if the child is in respiratory distress, use high flow nasal cannula or CPAP to deliver oxygen. In the setting of respiratory failure or fluid and catecholamine refractory state, intubate the child for mechanical ventilation. But there is a catch point. Do not intubate and give time for fluid resuscitation if not in respiratory failure, and airways and oxygenations can be maintained by other means. So delay intubation. Why delay intubation? Mechanical ventilation can be catastrophic in cases of hypovolemic states, as it further decreases the venous return. Because mechanical positive pressure ventilation, it will decrease the venous return, it will decrease the end diastolic filling pressure, it will decrease the preload, and there will be cardiogenic shock state. So you are treating a hypovolemic shock and you are instituting cardiogenic shock. So give time. If oxygenation is maintained by other means, give time for maintenance of the intravascular volume then only intubate. This is very important. Now fluid resuscitation 20 ml per kg of normal saline or RL. This is old concept. Within 5 minutes by disconnect reconnect method. What is this disconnect reconnect method? One is preparing the loading the saline and one is giving, just disconnect it and connect that the field saline, because you have to give it in within 5 minutes. So disconnect reconnect method you can give in 5 minutes. Repeat twice provided no hepatomegaly or crackles over the infrascalpal region. So if there is no hepatomegaly, no crackles over the base of the lungs, give, go on giving. Maintain blood glucose by giving 4 ml per kg of 10% or 2 ml per kg of 25% or 1 ml per kg of 50% dextrose. So you can give 10% by peripheral vein, but 25% and 50% by central vein. So central vein is not available, not you have not catheterized central vein, then give this 10% to maintain the blood glucose. Now maintain serum ionized calcium by giving 10% calcium chloride 10 to 20 milligram per kg, that is 1.1 to 0.2 ml, 1:1 ratio distilled water, slowly, not more than 100 milligram per minute, that is not more than 1 ml per minute. If proved hypocalcemia or cardiogenic shock due to hyperkalemia, if there is proved hypocalcemia or cardiogenic shock due to hyperkalemia, give this oxygen, or maybe due to hyperglycemia or calcium channel blocker toxicity. If there is cardiogenic shock due to hyperkalemia, hyperglycemia, calcium channel toxicity, give this calcium, and if there is low ionized calcium, give this calcium. Because what calcium will do? Calcium will stabilize the membranes, then it will increase the contractility of the myocardium, that is the heart. So maintain the ionized calcium level. So fluid responsiveness, new dynamics. What are the new dynamics? This is passive leg raising and variation in inferior vena cava dimension. So we have to see, passively raise the leg and see the variation in inferior vena cava. Just keep the ultrasound probe below the subcostal regions at the level of inferior vena cava and see what happens after the we have raised the leg. There are various methods. You have to see the inferior vena cava diameter. You can see the aorta diameter. If the ratio of inferior vena cava and aorta is 0.8 and more, it is fluid responsive. Then there are other index like you have to see the vena cava diameter during the expansion, minimum diameter expansion. So is subtracted minimum maximum extension minus minimum distension divided by minimum distension into 100. If it is more than 12%, then it is fluid responsive shock. If there is collapsibility during the inspiration, if you are seeing the inferior vena cava, if there is more than 50% collapse of the inferior vena cava during inspiration, it is fluid responsive shock. Okay, so this is the new parameters to see the fluid responsiveness. So you have to look for this inferior vena cava. You have to look for stroke volume by echocardiography. Then see the pulse pressure, and you have to monitor systolic pressure during mechanical ventilation. Respiratory variation in peak velocity of aortic flow. So you have to see the respiratory variation in peak velocity of aortic flow by ultrasound echocardiography, and it has 92% sensitivity and 85% specificity for fluid responsiveness. So these are the new dynamic parameter to see the fluid responsiveness, because if the clinical state of shock is not fluid responsive and you are giving the fluid, you are harming the child, you are overloading the heart, and you are deteriorating the condition rather than treating it. So you have to look for these things. So these are the new guidelines. So what are the recent changes in severe sepsis combined 2022 guidelines? So what I have described was early goal directed therapy, that is 20 ml per kg bolus over 5 minutes, then another 5 minutes bolus, another 5 minutes bolus. So these were the early goal directed therapy. Recently it is not recommended. What is recommended now is this. So what is the difference? 40 to 60 ml per kg bolus fluid, 10 to 20 ml per kg per bolus in 1 hour, not in 15 minutes. Previously what we are doing, in 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes by disconnect reconnect method. But what it says, 40 to 60 ml per kg bolus, 10 to 20 ml per kg per bolus in 1 hour, when if intensive care facility is available. But give only 40 ml, not 60 ml. Give only 40 ml per kg in 1 hour if hypotension is present and no bolus. No bolus if no hypotension and no intensive care facility is available. Why I have described you. If you have intensive care facility, you can see the fluid responsiveness by seeing the inferior vena cava, by seeing the cardiac motility, cardiac output. If it is not available to you, intensive care facility is not available to you, you are not knowing the fluid responsiveness, you are giving the fluid and you are harming the child. So give boluses over 15 to 10 minutes rather than over 5 to 10 minutes. So this is the recent changes. In cardiogenic shock, give only 5 to 10 ml per kg over 20 to 30 minutes. Take more time for giving bolus. And use plasma light or ringer lactate instead of normal saline. So this is the newer fluid, plasma light or ringer lactate. So recent recommendation is avoid NS because it may cause hypochloremic acidosis. So if plasma light is available, you can give plasma light, it is better. So it will avoid the hypochloremic acidosis and acute kidney injury. So recent recommendation of fluid is this. Now assess fluid overload by hemodynamic status, which I have described you, echocardiography, ultrasound. This is very important. So remember this mnemonic ROSE. What is this ROSE? So divide fluid resuscitation into 4 stages. ROSE. Resuscitation, you give fluid, optimization, optimize it, then stabilize the patient, and if on your assessment there is fluid signs of any sign of fluid overload, evacuate it. Give diuretics and renal replacement therapy in the form of dialysis, hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis. And you have seen in few cases in dengue, what I have done, if the child was in shock and I have not given fluid, rather I gave diuretics and the child improved. So this is the reason. So evacuation is important. So remember this ROSE. Now septic shock. So in cases of septic shock, the recent recommendation is epinephrine. After fluid, epinephrine. Epinephrine 0.1 to 1 microgram per kg per minute. If 40 to 60 ml per kg of fluid fail to improve the condition of shock. You have given this fluid and you fail, give epinephrine. So if the fluid has failed to improve perfusion and if there is earlier signs of fluid load before giving this 40 to 60 ml, if there is signs of fluid overload, stop giving fluid, give this epinephrine. What is the role of hydrocortisone in septic shock? Hydrocortisone, fluorocortisone, if no improvement after fluid and radioactives. So in various conditions of shock, it has been studied that there is relative deficiency of cortisol. So the ideal is you have to measure the cortisol level or corticotrophin stimulation test you have to do to 250 microgram of corticotrophin give and measure cortisol at 30 minutes, 60 minutes like that. If it is less than 9 milligram per dl, then give hydrocortisone. But this facility is not available and you have no time. So in case of septic shock, if this condition has treatment has not improved the condition, you can give hydrocortisone. So hydrocortisone 1 to 2 milligram per kg or 50 to 100 milligram per meter square you give and then maintenance dose. Early initiation of antimicrobials within 1 hour of diagnosis of shock and within 3 hours of diagnosis of sepsis is recommended. Otherwise, there will be high mortality. If there is septic shock and you have delayed in starting antibiotic, then there is high mortality. Mechanical ventilation in fluid refractory shock, or there is respiratory failure, or there is ARDS. But before giving before intubating the child and putting on mechanical ventilation, NIV can be tried. Non-invasive ventilation can be tried. If it is working, you continue. It will be better. So I have said you mechanical ventilation decreases the venous return and decreases the preload. So now what are the supportive therapy? So NIV improves outcome in decreased myocardial function. So if there is decreased myocardial function, non-invasive ventilation will help. So it is seen in the cardiogenic shock. This is very important. Early enteral feeding is better than parenteral feeding in first week. So previously what we were doing, child is on ventilator, child is on vasoactive, do not give feed. So this is no longer recommended. Early institution of enteral feed. If the child is tolerating feed, give feed. Do not delay it. Okay. So PRBC not recommended in hemodynamically stable child if hemoglobin is more than 7 gram. If the child is hemodynamically stable, hemoglobin is more than 7 gram, do not give PRBC. CRRT, continuous renal replacement therapy, is beneficial in fluid overload and removing toxic metabolites accumulated during the state of shock. Then comes the role of veno-venal ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, in ARDS and refractory hypoxemia, and veno-arterial ECMO in refractory septic shock. There is difference between ECMO, veno-venal or veno-arterial. We can give IVIG or plasmapheresis we can do in conditions of thrombocytopenia associated with multi-organ failure. And in case of MISC, which we have seen in COVID period, in these conditions you can give IVIG. And in toxic shock syndrome, we can give IVIG. Now, refractory septic shock. So, what is this refractory septic shock? If there is high blood lactate, more than 8 millimole per liter, with high vasoinotropes, we have used inotropes, and the total cumulative dose is more than 200 microgram per kg per minute, and there is myocardial dysfunction, it is a state of refractory septic shock. So, rule out potentially reversible causes before putting the child on ECMO. Suspect and rule out myocarditis, myocardial infarction, congestive cardiac failure with congenital heart disease, especially in infants. So, especially in infants, there are some congenital heart disease which is responsible for this refractory shock. So, rule out this. Now, cardiogenic shock, how to treat it? Oxygen delivery to tissue can be increased by maximizing cardiac function and increasing arterial oxygen content. How? Preload. We know till now that stroke volume depends on preload, cardiac contractility, and afterload. So preload can be optimized by using fluid, restricting fluid, and using diuretics if need. So I have said you to remember ROSE. So fluid optimization is very important, and then give inotropic support. IV fluid should be avoided in high right ventricular filling pressure like CCF. If there is CCF, avoid giving fluid. Myocardial contractility can be optimized by balancing calcium and potassium and using inotropes. So if there is low calcium, low potassium, optimize it and give inotropes to increase the myocardial contractility in cases of cardiogenic shock. And afterload can be reduced by addressing what I have said already, addressing pain, fever, anxiety. So if there is pain, fever, anxiety, there will be increased afterload. So address these conditions to decrease the afterload, and then use of vasodilator, inodilator, and positive blood pressure ventilation. What are these vasodilator, inodilator? I will describe. What are these things? So currently recommended inotropes for cardiogenic shock is what? Combination of dobutamine and noradrenaline. This is the currently recommended inotropes in conditions of cardiogenic shock. So use combination of dopamine and noradrenaline, and use adrenaline in inotrope resistant. If these are not working, then use adrenaline. First choice is dobutamine plus noradrenaline. Use of vasodilator like sodium nitroprusside and inodilators like milrinone reduce afterload. And in refractory cases, levosimendan may be used. I will say few words regarding all these things. What is milrinone? What is levosimendan? I will say. Now, prostaglandin E should be used in infants with duct-dependent left-sided obstructive lesion till the ability of definitive cardiac surgery. So there are so many duct-dependent lesions in the neonatal period. So to keep the duct open, use prostaglandin E infusion till the facility of surgery. So benefit of using digoxin and beta blockers not clear. So do not use this drug in cardiogenic shock. Blood transfusion when indicated to increase arterial content of oxygen and adequate respiratory support. Correction of metabolic acidosis and other metabolic abnormalities. And if all fail in cases of cardiogenic shock, then what we will do? Ventricular assist device and ECMO as a bridge therapy with cardiac transplant as an ultimate modality. So if all fail, then support with ventricular assist device and ECMO, and then do cardiac transplant. So this is ECMO CPR. This is another modality of treatment. Should be instituted as early as possible if facility is available in cases of myocarditis or myocardial dysfunction leading to cardiogenic shock. Now, how will you treat obstructive shock? So initial resuscitation is same as in any shock. Then treat underlying cause. If there is collection in the pericardium, pericardiocentesis, if there is cardiac tamponade, immediate needle thoracotomy followed by chest tube drainage in cases of tension pneumothorax. But I have told you there is difference between pneumothorax and tension pneumothorax. Tension pneumothorax may be responsible for shock, so immediate release it. And fibrinolytics, thrombectomy with inotropes in cases of pulmonary thrombosis. So if there is pulmonary thrombosis, use fibrinolytic agents and thrombectomy. So these are the treatment of obstructive shock. Now distributive shock. So initial steps are the same like fluid resuscitation. Then in case of anaphylactic shock, what we should give adrenaline 1:10,000 0.1 ml per kg every 3 to 5 minutes, 3 doses. Maximum dose is 1 milligram. And if hypotension persists, start infusion of adrenaline 0.1 microgram per kg per minute up to a maximum dose of 1 milligram per kg per minute and remove the inciting agent. So this is the treatment of distributive shock. And in cases of neurogenic shock, responsible for distributive shock, start noradrenaline in the dose of 0.1 microgram per kg per minute and titrate up to 1 microgram per kg per minute as per the need of clinical condition. So this is the treatment of distributive shock. Now, what is inodilators and lucitropics? Inodilator. Ino means what? Inotropic, chronotropic. Inotropic is which increases the contraction of the heart. Chronotropic means which increases the rate of the heart. Dilator means which dilates the vessels. Lucitropic means which maintains the dielectric capacity of the heart, keeps in adequate dilation. This is lucitropic. So dilatation is important because if the heart will not be dilated, then venous return will be less, then there will be less preload, then there will be less stroke volume leading to shock. So lucitropic do the adequate dilatation of the heart. So inotropic, chronotropic, lucitropic, and inodilator means it acts as inotropic as well as dilator. That is milrinone. So milrinone is what? Phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitor with inotropic, lucitropic, and vasodilator properties. This is a very good drug for cardiogenic shock. When it is indicated when blood pressure and intravascular volume is maintained but periphery is cold and cardiac output is low. So if the periphery is cold and if you can see the cardiac output by echocardiography, this is indicated. This is a very good drug, phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitor, that is milrinone, which has inotropic effect, which has dilatory effect, and which has lucitropic effect. So load with 50 microgram per kg over 30 to 60 minutes and then start infusion at the rate of 0.25 microgram to 0.75 microgram per kg per minute. If it is not working, then give levosimendan. Levosimendan load with 6 to 24 microgram per kg over 10 minutes then start infusion at the rate of 0.05 to 2 microgram per kg per minute. What is this levocimendin? Levocimendin is calcium sensitizer which enhances the troponin C sensitivity to cardiocytes and causes vasodilation in periphery by acting on sodium potassium channel. So it has two property. One is sensitizes the troponin C to the myocytes, increases the cardiac contractility, as well as it has vasodilatory effect also. So this is another immunodilator, calcium sensitizing property, immunodilator. So if the milrinone fails, then start levocimendin. So another property of levocimendin is if you are suspecting pulmonary hypertension, it decreases the pulmonary pressure also. So it works in decreasing the pulmonary artery pressures. If there is high BNP, which we are measuring here, it decreases the level of BNP also. So it has neurohormonal properties also. So these are two very beneficial drug, milrinone and levocimendin. But for the use of milrinone, you have to see if there is thrombocytopenia. If thrombocyte is less than 50,000, avoid it because it is known to cause thrombocytopenia. Milrinone. So two adverse effects of milrinone are thrombocytopenia and arrhythmia. Now, supportive therapy give PRBC to raise arterial oxygen if SpO2 is less than 70%. SpO2 how to measure? I have described you how to measure the SpO2. So surrogate marker is only if you have put the central venous line, take the blood from here and it is surrogate of the SpO2. If it is less than 70%, give PRBC. This is another indication of giving PRBC. In hemodynamically stable child, blood transfusion if hemoglobin is less than 7 gram and if the child is hemodynamically unstable, give PRBC if the hemoglobin is less than 10 grams. So if hemodynamically unstable, transfuse at less than 10, if stable, transfuse at less than 7. So this is the current recommendation. What about bicarbonate? So we are very eager to use bicarbonate in any clinical condition. Give bicarbonate, give bicarbonate, give bicarbonate. It should be avoided as it may cause hypernatremia, hyperosmolarity and intracellular acidosis. How? Because if you give bicarbonate, it is not going directly to the tissues, it breaks and forms carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide dissolves and go into the cells and it increases the acidity of cells. So if you will give bicarbonate, it will increase the acidity of cells and cause harm. So do not give. Try to maintain pH by increasing perfusion with fluid with or without vasopressors. So avoid giving bicarbonate. Try to maintain pH by giving fluid. So many times I have told you the most common cause of non-anion gap metabolic acidosis in children is diarrhea. Diarrhea, dehydration, bicarbonate loss. What we are doing, once we give adequate fluid, the pH is normalized. So do not be in hurry to give bicarbonate. Maintain pH by giving fluid and if required vasoactive drugs. And when needed absolutely, sometimes if the pH is very low like less than 7.2 and in diabetes less than 7.8, then ensure proper ventilation before giving it because this bicarbonate is going in the body and there will be formation of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is accumulating and ventilation is not proper, it will be dangerous. So before giving, ensure ventilation is proper. If ventilation is proper, then you can give. And the last option is ECMO in any type of shock, and ECMO is of two types, veno-venal or veno-arterial. So these are the references. This I have put to make my talk authentic only.